The traffic slowed, and the gaslight changed from red to green, and the four of them made their way, along with a small collection of otters, rabbits, mice, and foxes, towards the other side of the street, and continued onward down the cement and stone path. They passed the businesses and shops, the nearest being a badger-run barber's. The sign outside was of a badger's head, their hair being held aloft by a pair of floating shears, which the painted badger seemed to be enjoying, judging by the smile they had on their face, swinging gently as they passed. Barkling made a note to get his hair cut when he got the chance, but it was quietly forgotten as they passed a slew of continually fancier and more decadently decorated taverns and restaurants of various sizes and shapes. It seemed as though each of these buildings, as they had been designed and erected, had a theme of one type or another in mind. They passed by a bakery in the shape of a large jam swirl, the front painted in a bright red jelly swirl and topped with a wooden cutout of a painted cream dollop. Next to it sat a sister cafe of a giant cup of coffee, which steamed theatrically as they passed by. Averley peered inside and could see a collection of couches and cushions placed all over the place, where many animals, both small and large, sat comfortably within their soft recesses, enjoying steaming and iced mugs of various sweet drinks. Their chatter spread out onto the street as they passed by, though no single conversation could be heard over the other, and quickly bled into the sounds of the street beyond. The group passed stores of varied construction, clothing stores in the shape of a tailor's spool, a restaurant in the shape of a large pie whose windows bulged comically within the curved dough-colored walls of the establishment, and others of various shape and color, all related to the businesses or types of goods contained within. "It's pretty stunning, isn't it?" asked Rose, staring up as they passed by a grocer's in the shape of a basket whose roof resembled a white linen cloth. She reached out and touched the woven thicket wall, which moved gently at her touch. "It's alive," said Averley, surprised, as the branches moved gently from the touch only to return back to where it had been previously as she removed her paw. "Do you think this whole area is enchanted?" asked Barkland, looking around to see if other places were so clearly magically inclined. "I have no idea, but I hope so," said Averley. They were in high spirits when the group reached the last street corner, which sat across from the large red and white toadstool that took up the center of the block adjacent, painted atop with two swinging doors in large script which shimmered from one color to the next: green, pink, blue, red, then orange, red. The Toadstool Royal Tavern. Samuel stared at the sign as they waited for the gaslight across the street to change. "That's very pretty," said Samuel, pointing towards the sign. The others agreed with him. "I can't wait to see what the rest of it is," said Rose excitedly. The light changed, and the group made their way across the street, stepping up to the bar and walked inside. It was a large and open space inside, with windows wrapping around the walls, spilling light throughout. A circular bar ran the circumference of the inside of the building, which surrounded the ovens, sink bottles, glassware, and kegs in the center of the room, except for the entrance, and where the bathrooms were. Booths lined each part of the outer walls. Seats lined the entirety of the bar, except where the arches ran from the center of the bar towards each of the booths, looping high and coming down level at each table, like the formed spokes of a large wheel. The tavern was absolutely packed with animals enjoying a variety of foods and drinks. Many were busy enjoying each other's company and their nourishment with abandon. Some were unashamedly drunk and laughing uproariously with one another. Behind the bar, a toad of immense size, though not fat, was entertaining a group of foxes and otters. He placed 20 small glasses in front of him, and had a bottle of dark wire-colored liquid. Without a word and a smile on his face, the bottle pulled itself away from his lips, and the liquid poured itself neatly between its containers, before twisting the cork back into place and floating back into one of the empty spots on the wall behind him. The toad, unmistakably Roland, the one that they had been tasked with going to see, pointed his finger at the glasses, and in unison they moved down the bar and into the outstretched paws of the animals waiting for their libations. The animals that had been waiting cheered loudly as they closed their fingers around their glasses, slammed the drinks back in unison, and slid a coin each towards the toad, who palmed them quickly and made them disappear from the bar top with one swift movement. The lead fox smacked his paw on the bar, asking for another, and the others cheered on in agreement. Roe wagged his finger, and another bottle, this one full of similar liquid to the first, made its way to the counter as the glasses they had been drinking from slid back into two single-filed lines and back to their original positions. This time the bottle poured itself, completing the cycle similarly as it had before. This time, as the money made its way towards the toad, a small pouch caught the coins before they could fall from the counter, catching each one as they flew over the edge, but before hitting the tiled floor of the bar below. The group that ordered finished their drinks and cheered for another round as the toad smiled and walked away, letting his magic do its job. He noticed the four young animals as they walked up to the bar. "Hello, younglings," said Rose, smiling a wide, toothless grin at the four of them. "Welcome to the Toadstool." He held out his arm and waved it towards the bar beyond him. Barkland just stared. How did you do that? Asked Parkland, astonished at the sight of what he'd just seen. Rose smiled and waggled his finger at the badger. I have my ways, young Master Barkland, said Roe. Barkland blanched, then realized that the toad probably knew his name because Jeffries had told him they were coming and it would have been the proper thing to do. The group came up to the bar just as an oven behind Roe ding loudly sighed and the lid flipping open and a large crock of what looked like stew gently glided out from the oven, down the bar, and out the nearest spoke and towards one of the tables behind them. A bevy of bowls and cutlery danced behind it, twirling as they went. Rose stood slack-jawed as the bowls passed overhead. That's amazing, said Rose. Rose smiled. Thank you, young Rose, said Rose proudly. Samuel was transfixed by the bottles and kegs that lifted and poured themselves into waiting glasses and mugs, which slid up and down the bars on trays, which returned with small piles of silver and gold coins, all of which got flipped into the black bag that traveled around the inside of the bar but never seemed to slow from the added weight. Samuel was impressed by the efficiency of the system and wondered whether something like this could be done for the basic things around the kiln back home. Samuel pictured pieces of wood lifting themselves up from the sack of firewood against the wall and walking themselves into the fire, only to build the fire too large, and thought against it. It's probably a good thing that it was done by Paul. Roe walked to a break in the bar and lifted the countertop upwards. He walked through the bar and placed the counter back where it had been. He made his way over the travelers and beamed at them. Let's find a place to talk and get you all something to eat and drink, and then we can get to business, shall we? Asked Roe, walking between the group and down through the hallway that led off of the main dining area. They passed the bathroom and continued on to a small doorway. Roe reached into his shirt and pulled out a small brass key, unlocked the door, and passed through the door, and the others followed. They came into a staircase that wound its way up along the wall of the building and eventually came out on the seating area above the main hall. The sounds of the patrons were carried up to them but were muffled by the flooring beneath their feet. It was private. A small circular table set in the center of the square room. Banisters contained the three walls which adorned the wall with the door's entrance, and they could see over into the tavern underneath. The whole of the floor was visible to them from that vantage point. I come here to eat my meals and keep an eye on things, said Roe offhandedly and gestured to the table. Please, take a seat, as he pointed towards the chairs. The group did as they were asked, and once they were comfortable, Roe spoke up again. Roe reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small letter. He passed it to Samuel, who looked up at him curiously. This will let you know where you need to go when you're ready with your elemental, said Roe. Samuel nodded and, taking the letter, placed it in his pocket. Shall we order some food then? Asked Roe, pulling a collection of papers from his pocket and a few pens as well. This is my menu. All you have to do is circle the picture of what you want and lay it down here on the circle. He pointed to the collection of runes that encircled one point of the table and led out into a spoke such as the others around the floor below. It ran down towards the bar in a gentle arc. You may have anything you like free of charge. Drinks are down there in green. If you want to order more than one order, circle it twice or however many times you like. I recommend the pies. They're my father's recipe and are truly wonderful, said Rose, smiling to himself and handing each of them a piece of paper with a collection of runes on it. The group thanked him for it. I'll be back once I've made sure everything is all right down there. Please take your time and enjoy the show. You should have a good view of the tavern from up here, which almost nobody gets to see, said Roe, stepping back from the table and walking down the stairs and disappearing from sight. The group watched as he reappeared a moment later on the floor below and made his way back to the bar as food and drink continued to circle from table and bar. It paused momentarily as he lifted the break in the countertop and went through, and continued as he dropped it back into place. They sat and watched the tavern for a while, mesmerized by the traveling plates and the glitter of coin and glassware as they traveled unheeded to and from the bar without a single finger to guide them. It's an amazing place, isn't it? Asked Samuel, turning back to the table and looking at the menu he held with both paws. Most assuredly, said Averly, turning to face her own menu. The various smells from the foods passing underneath her had her mouth watering. Parkland was in much the same way and studied his as well. Rose was the last to turn back as she found the tavern's magic truly wonderful in both a calming and hypnotic way. It reminded her of her rhythmic way her mother's handled the baked goods while they really got busy at the stand. She felt a momentary pang of guilt at the thought of her mother having to deal with it on her own, but pushed the thought away from her mind and turned her attention to the piece of paper placed before her. There were many items on the page, all arranged neatly in rows and columns based on what was in the dish, and whether the dish was hot, cold, soup, baked, broiled, or roasted. There were dishes she had never heard of, as well as things she had only had on special occasions growing up, during festivals and things like her birthday and holidays shared with friends and at the Badger's Tavern. She mulled over the page, undecided on what to choose. The others were not so picky. Parkland was the first to pick his, circling a roasted vegetable medley as well as a bread pudding, along with deep peach mead as his drink of choice. After he was done encircling his choices, he placed it within the circle near the arch, leading away from the table. The paper glowed a mixture of green and blue, and the paper dissolved into a small puff of blue smoke, and the light from the runes below it glowed a faint green. Parkland smiled at the display and clapped his paws together. "Wow, this place is pretty neat," said Parkland. Samuel was the next to finish his order, ordering a roasted pumpkin soup and fresh bread and an order of Clerico, which the tavern had on tap. Before placing it within the ruined circle between him and Parkland, it disappeared in the same manner as Parkland's, and Samuel smiled as well at the show of it. Below them, a collection of vegetables pulled themselves from a hamper underneath one of the nearest sinks, washed themselves beneath the tap that turned itself on, and diced themselves under a knife that sharpened itself against a static sharpening rod and cut the vegetables expertly. They tumbled themselves into various pots and trundled into the oven nearest the table. The oven sighed, closed its door, and began to glow with the blue light of a lit flame. The group, of course, missed this, as they were too busy talking about the toad they had just met, marveling over the tavern that ran itself. "He's pretty large for a toad, isn't he?" asked Averly, placing her menu into the circle and poofing it out of existence with one quick movement. Averly returned her paws to rest in front of her and began to fidget with her locket subconsciously, twisting it gently beneath the fingers of her right paw. It comforted her to feel the weight of it in her palm. "Yes, I wonder how old he is," said Rose, resting her chin on one paw. Parkland slapped his paw on the tabletop and pointed to where his fingers had been resting. "Did you notice the detail work that went into this place? There's flowers carved into the tables, and I bet throughout the whole place." He was right. Flowers had been carved intricately across the tabletop, passing around the runes at the end of the table and continued over the shelf that headed over to the bar in the center of the room below. Large roses wrapped with leaves and thorns curled around them, with the word "Ka" interspersed between them in wrapped cursive ribbon that touched each stem in a gentle embrace that seemed to dance in the light cast from the gas lamps around the perimeter overhead. Rose looked over at Samuel, who was quietly staring off into the mass of patrons below. Sitting below at the bar, beneath a familiar purple cowl, sat a brown mouse Samuel swore he knew. The mouse bent down and took a sip from the mug in front of him, and placed it slowly down in front of him. "No, they couldn't be," said Samuel quietly. "Couldn't be what?" asked Rose, poking Samuel in the ribs gently and smiling. "I think you and I need to go downstairs for a minute," said Samuel to Rose. "Oh, okay," said Rose, looking concerned. "If you'll excuse us, I think there's someone down there we know," said Samuel. Parkland smiled. "Oh, all right," said Parkland. Parkland turned to Averly. "Would you like to play a few hands of Snap while we wait for them to get back then, or we could chat if you like," said Parkland, reaching into his green pouch around his neck. "Sure, I would love a game of Snap," said Averly with a devilish grin. Averly stopped fidgeting with her locket and placed both of her paws on the table in front of her and began wiring an inlaid rose that lay in front of her with her thumb. Rose and Samuel made their way back down the stairs and into the crowded dining area. Plates, bowls, and glasses, both full and empty, whizzed by them overhead to and from their tables to their destinations. Animals of all types and levels of inebriation grouped together as they ate and drank. Some sang songs and encouraged each other's debauchery and enjoyment. Others sat solemnly and ate quietly. The two of them moved towards the lone animal at the end of the curve, nearest them where the hunched figure sat at the bar drinking from an amber mug of acorn ale and enjoying a steaming bowl of vegetable stew. "Nice to see you again, Samuel and Rose," said the hunched figure without raising their head. Samuel and Rose took a couple of steps up to the figure, and smiles broke out across their faces. "Mr. Rowan, what are you doing here?" asked Samuel. "Oh, I'm just here having a nice meal is all. You folks having a fine day?" asked Rowan, slipping the hood from his head, his ears bouncing slightly as the hood slid off. Rose and Samuel both nodded. Rowan took a spoonful of potato from his stew and chewed it, savoring the mouthful. "I've got to speak with you if you've got the time," said Rowan, taking a sip from his mug and placing it back where he had lifted it from once again. Rose and Samuel looked at one another. "Sure thing, Mr. Rowan," said Rose, as an uneasiness building in her stomach. "We've got a table upstairs," said Samuel, pointing to the patio overhanging the upper floor. Rowan took another sip of his drink and placed his spoon in his bowl. "Best if I come join you up there, then. Is Barkley and that young wolf up there with you?" asked Rowan, pushing his food away from him. "Yes, they are," said Samuel. Samuel and Rose exchanged shocked looks with one another, and they turned to make their way towards the end of the room. Rowan got up from his seat, leaving his food behind, and followed behind the two of them into the crowded dining area. The three of them made it to the doorway. leading to the stairs to find Averly coming through the door in the opposite direction. Just heading to the bathroom, said Averly. They made room for her to pass and headed up the stairs. Averly made it to the bathroom and found that there was no line waiting for her when she arrived. After she was done and began washing her paws, the stall next to the one she had used opened, and the animal that used it walked out, moving to the basin next to her and began washing up. After a few moments of quiet washing, a familiar voice rang out. Averly! Croaked an unmistakable voice. Averly blinked hard and turned to face the animal that called out her name. Looking up at her from the basin that sat next to her, red bandana wrapped around her wrist, damp from the recent water washing over it, was Heather smiling up at her. Averly's heart first shot up into her throat and then sunk into the bottom of her stomach. "Hello, Heather," half whispered Averly, shocked by the sight of the small toad standing next to her. Averly looked her over and noticed the small, uncut line of bruising that ran underneath each of Heather's eyes. "How are you?" asked Averly, genuinely concerned. "I've been better, sis," said Heather, smiling. Averly noted that she was healing from a recently split lip, and she cursed Velderon for it. Heather noticed the look Averly gave her, and her smile widened. "Don't worry about that. The old bastard isn't going to beat me down, no matter how hard he goes at it," said Heather, wiping her fingers on the cloth towel that hung over the basin. Averly moved over to Heather and hugged her as hard as she possibly could. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I did that to you. Sorry, Shutterbug. I knew if I left," sobbed Averly, holding Heather against her and squeezing her with all her might. Heather hugged her back. "It's all right, Flea Dip. It's nothing we haven't faced before, and his aim is getting bad with old age. He's drinking too much anyway. Those shakes he's getting are pretty permanent now, and it's easier to avoid him, and I'm glad anyway. I'm so glad you're able to get away. When I can, I'll do the same. It's what we all want to do when we can. You just figured out how to do it first. I knew it was coming anyway. I saw how you stopped eating, and it had to mean you were saving for something. So that had to mean you were planning to get away. You could have told me, I could have helped you. It wouldn't have hurt anything," said Heather, pulling back from Averly, tears in her eyes. Averly wasn't sure if Heather was hurt because she wasn't told, or the repercussions of having left, and decided it was probably a combination of both, and hugged her again, this time gently. "I couldn't tell you. If I had and he found out, he would have beat you to death, hon. He wouldn't have stopped. At least if you didn't know, he would have stopped eventually. At least that's what my rationale to it was anyway," said Averly. Averly hugged her close and pulled away once again. Had been carved intricately across the tabletop, passing around the runes at the end of the table and continued over the shelf that headed over to the bar in the center of the room below. Large roses wrapped with leaves and thorns curled against them, with the word Ka interspersed between them in wrapped cursive ribbon that touched each stem in a gentle embrace that seemed to dance in the light cast from the gas lamps around the perimeter overhead. Rose looked over at Samuel, who was quietly staring off into the mass of patrons below. Sitting below at the bar, beneath a familiar purple cowl, sat a brown mouse Samuel swore he knew. The mouse bent down and took a sip from the mug in front of him, and placed it slowly back in front of him, and placed it slowly down in front of him. "No, that couldn't be," said Samuel quietly. "Couldn't be what?" asked Rose, poking Samuel in the ribs gently and smiling. "I think you and I need to go downstairs for a minute," said Samuel to Rose. "Oh, okay," said Rose, looking concerned. "Oh, okay," said Rose, looking concerned. "If you'll excuse us, I think there's someone down there we know," said Samuel. Barklin smiled. "Oh, all right," said Barklin. Barklin turned to Averly. "Would you like to play a few hands of Snap while we wait for them to get back then, or we could chat if you like," said Barklin, reaching into his green pouch around his neck. Sure, I would love a game of Snap," said Averly with a devilish grin. Averly stopped fidgeting with her locket and placed both of her paws on the table in front of her and began wiring an inlaid rose that lay in front of her with her thumb. Rose and Samuel made their way back down the stairs and into the crowded dining area. Plates, bowls, and glasses, both full and empty, whizzed by them overhead to and from their tables to their destinations. Animals of all types and levels of inebriation grouped together as they ate and drank. Some sang songs. Hi everybody. So I've made a new store called AnimalQuest.shop, and I made my first shirt, Barkland Reading, at the Amberstone's house, and I would ask that you go and buy those there. I'll make a few bucks each time you buy something from there. And I have men, women's, baby clothing, and buttons, as well as other accessories, including dog bandanas, which I think are pretty cool. And I'll be adding more merch every week or two for that store as the stories progress and the sequels are written and read. I'll do the same for Divergent Mind. The link again is AnimalQuest.shop. The link for Divergent Mind will be divergentmind.shop as well. Thank you so much. Jay. Please visit anchor.fm/divergentmind to leave a message so that I may get back to you. Thank you. Have a nice day. Okay, well, I'm taking a break, so I might as well do some ads. This is my first one, so bear with me. So, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. That's pretty cool. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And all you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. So I just signed up for Anchor's funding platform for the podcasters. It seems like a better deal than Patreon at the moment. So I would ask that you click the button that says donate and maybe donate $1 or $5 or $10 a month to us so that we can keep going. And I can produce almost daily or daily podcasts or more in the way that I've been going. And I'll produce book after book after book after book, and then I'll read through them. And I'll keep doing that until I can't see an end to it. It's so much fun. It really is. So please go to anchor.fm/divergentmind and click the donate button, and that'll help me out a whole bunch. Thank you so much, Jay. Okay, so I just wanted to let you know that I have a YouTube channel called Taught Myself, and that I've decided to start selling merch already with a phrase that my brother showed me saying, "My disability is invisible," of which I made a hat for myself. So I decided to make hats, shirts, hoodies, for both men and women on Spreadshirt.com. All you have to do is search for "My disability is invisible." It's in green, and that's mine. You'll know it's me because when you click the sale icon, the same little Divergent Mind icon comes up. And I hope you'll support me. I make about $5 per shirt or per sale. Everything else goes to Spreadshirt. But that's okay because it's still a better deal than a lot of other places. And I really hope you'll support me. Come check me out on the YouTube. Teach me how to do that properly so I can have a community there too. And I await your response. Have a lovely day. Jay.
Hey people, take a listen to the Divergent Mind podcast. You get both insight into living with a serious mental illness and get to listen to a lovely tale about a journey cute little animals need to take. Don't miss out, and remember, divergent minds don't need to think alike.
Please go to ratethispodcast.com/divergentmind and tell me what you think. Thank you very much. Yours truly, Jay.